April 12, 1945. 47 a.m. Kakaza Ridge, Okinawa. The bamboo pen scraped across rice paper in the gloom as a Japanese officer documented what would become one of the few recorded accounts of encountering American night vision equipment, his hands trembling from a revelation that overturned 30 years of military doctrine. The Americans possess devices that allow them to see in total darkness. This is not speculation. They eliminated our infiltrators at distances we measured at 70 yards in pitch black. No muzzle flash visible. They observe us while we remain blind. Through the moonless night, Japanese forces had just confronted something that contradicted everything the Imperial Japanese Army had taught about night combat superiority. For 3 years, Japanese forces had dominated darkness. Their nocturnal assaults, honed since the Russo-Japanese War of 1904, had terrorized Allied troops from Guadalcanal to Burma. But here on this coral ridge in Okinawa, American soldiers were engaging Japanese infiltrators in absolute darkness with precision that defied human capability. The assault force from the Japanese 62 ND Division's Night Assault Unit had been annihilated, each soldier killed by accurate fire from unseen enemies. No star shells, no searchlights, no flares, just precise carbine fire from positions that should have been blind. The Americans possessed technology that transformed darkness from Japan's greatest tactical asset into a killing ground visible only to them. What the Japanese forces didn't realize was that they had encountered the T3 carbine, later designated M3, equipped with the revolutionary sniper scope, an infrared night vision system that enabled American soldiers to see clearly at 70 to 125 yards in complete darkness. This technology, so secret that even most American troops were unaware of it, would contribute to the psychological devastation of Japanese forces who had built their entire tactical doctrine around nocturnal superiority. The evolution of night warfare was being demonstrated not in large-scale battles, but in the shadows, where Japanese soldiers would discover that their empire's most prized tactical advantage had become obsolete in the face of American innovation. The Japanese mastery of night operations had deep historical roots. Since the Meiji Restoration, the Imperial Army had emphasized night maneuvers to offset Western technological superiority. At Port Arthur in 1904, Japanese night attacks had overwhelmed Russian positions previously deemed impregnable. The doctrine was refined over decades in China, where nocturnal infiltration and assault became the hallmark of Japanese tactical dominance. The Japanese military's Night Combat Manual, captured and translated by American intelligence in 1944, stated, "Night nullifies all technical superiority. In darkness, the warrior's skill and training overcome mechanical advantages. One trained Japanese soldier at night equals 10 enemies relying on technology." This was not mere propaganda. At Guadalcanal in 1942, Japanese night attacks had nearly driven Marines into the sea. The battles of Edson's Ridge and Henderson Field were won by such narrow margins that Marine commanders privately admitted Japanese nocturnal tactics had almost prevailed. Colonel Merritt Edson himself wrote in his after-action report, "They came at night like phantoms. Our men fired at sounds, at shadows, at their own imagination. The Japanese moved through darkness as if born to it." Statistical analysis by the U.S. Army's Operations Research Office revealed that from 1942 to 1944, Japanese forces inflicted 60% of American casualties during night operations, while nocturnal combat comprised only 30% of total engagement time. Night infiltration units achieved significantly higher casualty rates compared to daylight operations. The darkness was mathematically Japan's domain. Japanese training for night combat was extensive and rigorous. Soldiers trained blindfolded for months, learning to disassemble and reassemble weapons by touch alone. They practiced moving silently in total darkness, communicating through subtle touches and prearranged signals. They studied the sounds of American equipment until they could distinguish an M1 Garand's action from a Bars at 50 yards by sound alone. The revolution in night combat began not on the battlefield but in American laboratories. The infrared sniper scope project originated in 1943 when the National Defense Research Committee recognized the need for night vision capability. RCA, Radio Corporation of America, had been developing image intensifier tubes since the mid-1930s, and by 1943 they had created the 1P25 tube capable of converting invisible infrared light into visible images. The system consisted of several components: an infrared spotlight emitting light invisible to the human eye, mounted above the carbine barrel, a scope containing the image intensifier tube that detected this infrared light and converted it into a visible green-hued image, and a heavy battery pack worn on the soldier's back connected to the weapon by a cable. The complete system weighed roughly 28 to 30 pounds. But it provided something invaluable: the ability to see and engage targets in total darkness. The T3 carbine, experimental designation later standardized as M3, was a modified M2 carbine fitted with this infrared system. In testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground, operators achieved 80% hit rates on man-sized targets at 70 yards in complete darkness, revolutionary accuracy for night combat. Effective range varied from 70 yards in poor conditions to 125 yards in ideal circumstances. By late 1944, limited production had commenced. RCA manufactured about 1,700 infrared scopes during World War II, with roughly 150 complete T3/M3 systems reaching the Pacific theater by spring 1945. The weapons arrived under strict security protocols. Only specially selected marksmen were trained on the system. They were forbidden from discussing the equipment even with other American units. The Battle of Okinawa, beginning April 1, 1945, would become the first major combat test of infrared night vision technology. U.S. Army units involved in the invasion, particularly the 96th and 7th Infantry Divisions, received the first shipments of T3 carbines in early April 1945. Distribution was limited, typically 2 carbines per rifle company in sectors where nocturnal infiltration was anticipated. According to the U.S. Army's official history, Okinawa, the last battle, the infrared sniper scopes proved immediately effective against Japanese night infiltration tactics. The 96th Infantry Division's after-action report noted, enemy night infiltration, previously our most serious tactical problem, has been largely neutralized by new equipment allowing engagement of targets in darkness. That first night of combat, April 1 to 2, 1945, Japanese forces launched their traditional nocturnal infiltration attacks against American positions. These attacks, which had been devastatingly effective throughout the Pacific War, met a new reality. American soldiers equipped with infrared sniper scopes could clearly see Japanese soldiers moving in what they believed was concealing darkness. A report from the 7th Infantry Division described the psychological impact. Enemy forces exhibited confusion and disorganization when engaged by accurate fire in complete darkness. Traditional infiltration tactics were abandoned after initial casualties. The infrared system operated on a simple but revolutionary principle. The infrared spotlight, essentially a sealed beam lamp with an infrared filter, projected a cone of invisible light up to 150 yards. This light reflected off objects and was captured by the scope's image intensifier tube. The 1P25 tube, manufactured by RCA, amplified this infrared light and converted it to visible wavelengths, presenting the operator with a green-tinted but clear image of the battlefield. Technical Sergeant John Murray of the 96th Infantry Division, one of the first trained sniper scope operators, described the experience in a 1985 interview with the Army Center of Military History. Looking through that scope at night was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Japanese soldiers appeared as bright green figures against darker backgrounds. You could see their faces, their rank insignia, identify their weapons. They moved carefully, professionally, using excellent light. Infantry tactics. But they had no idea we could see them. The psychological advantage was as significant as the technological one. Murray continued, the Japanese had owned the night for 3 years. They moved with complete confidence in darkness. Watching them through the scope, you could see that confidence in their movements. Then we'd fire and you'd see the confusion, the panic. They couldn't understand how we could see them. The infrared spotlight was completely invisible to the naked eye, meaning Japanese forces never saw it coming. Operators were trained to fire single shots or short bursts, then immediately relocate. This made counter-fire impossible, even if Japanese forces could determine the general direction of incoming fire. Within a week of the invasion, Japanese night operations on Okinawa had dramatically decreased. The 32nd Army, defending Okinawa under General Mitsuru Oshiyama, had planned extensive night counterattacks as part of their defensive strategy. These plans were largely abandoned after the first weeks. Casualties. Colonel Hiramaki Yahara, senior operations officer of the 32nd Army and one of the few senior officers to survive the battle, wrote in his post-war memoir, The Battle for Okinawa, 1973, our night assault units, which had never failed in 3 years of war, were being eliminated before reaching American lines. The Americans possessed some capability we did not understand. While Yahara's memoir doesn't specifically mention infrared technology, he likely never learned the exact nature of the American capability. He documented the complete breakdown of Japanese night operations. Units that had specialized in night combat refused to leave their caves after dark. The sophisticated infiltration tactics that had been refined over decades, were abandoned. The U.S. Army's Operations Research Office calculated that during the first week of combat on Okinawa, infrared-equipped units accounted for approximately 30% of all Japanese small arms casualties during night operations, despite representing less than 1% of American weapons. This extraordinary effectiveness led to rapid changes in Japanese tactics. Declassified technical reports from 1945 reveal both the capabilities and limitations of the infrared sniper scope system. The device operated effectively in complete darkness, but had several significant constraints that Japanese forces never discovered or exploited. The battery system, using heavy lead-acid cells similar to automobile batteries, limited operation to 20 to 30 minutes of continuous use, though intermittent use could extend this to several hours. The weight, nearly 30 pounds for the complete system, made rapid movement difficult. Operators were essentially fixed position specialists rather than mobile infantry. Weather significantly affected performance. Heavy rain reduced effective range to under 40 yards. Fog and smoke scattered infrared light, creating halos that obscured targets. White phosphorus, commonly used in combat, rendered the system temporarily useless. However, Japanese forces, unaware of the technology's nature, never systematically tested these conditions. The infrared spotlight, while invisible to the naked eye, could theoretically be detected by anyone looking directly at it through certain optical devices with coated lenses. Some Japanese naval binoculars actually had the capability to detect infrared, but Japanese forces never realized this or developed detection procedures. As the Okinawa campaign progressed, American forces refined their use of the infrared sniper scopes. The 7th Infantry Division developed a technique called infrared ambush, positioning the devices to cover likely infiltration routes, trails, water sources, gaps in wire obstacles. These positions would remain dark and silent until Japanese forces entered the kill zone, then engage with devastating accuracy. The 96th Infantry Division's after-action report described their employment. Sniper scope operators were positioned to provide interlocking fields of observation. Primary sectors were assigned with overlap to ensure complete coverage of defensive frontage. Operators engaged targets of opportunity while reporting larger formations for artillery or mortar fire. Another innovation was psychological warfare through selective engagement. Some infiltration attempts would be allowed to pass unmolested while others were completely eliminated. This randomness created paralyzing uncertainty among Japanese forces who never knew whether they were being watched. The limited number of devices, approximately 150 for the entire Okinawa operation, meant careful tactical distribution. Priority went to sectors where night infiltration was most likely. Gaps in lines, supply routes, water points, and approaches to command posts. The scarcity actually enhanced effectiveness by creating uncertainty about where the capability existed. Japanese intelligence desperately attempted to understand the American night fighting capability. Captured Japanese documents from Okinawa translated by the Allied translator and interpreter sectionatus reveal various theories about American night vision, ranging from the partially correct to the fantastic. One intelligence report from the 62nd Division dated April 20, 1945 speculated Americans may possess infrared detection equipment similar to aerial photography devices. Countermeasure movement during rain may degrade effectiveness. This was remarkably close to the truth. But without understanding the active infrared spotlight component, Japanese forces couldn't develop effective countermeasures. Another report suggested Americans had developed a drug enhancing night vision, leading to experiments with massive vitamin A consumption among Japanese troops. Some units tried covering themselves with mud to reduce body heat, incorrectly assuming thermal detection was involved. The most accurate assessment came from a captured Japanese technical officer's notebook. Americans use artificial light invisible to human eye. Detection method unknown. Counter detection impossible with current equipment. But this insight came too late and wasn't widely disseminated. The effectiveness of infrared sniper scopes on Okinawa can be quantified through various military reports. Approximately 150 T3/M3 carbines deployed. % of Japanese night combat casualties in first week attributed to infrared Equipped units. 4% reduction in Japanese night operations from April 1 to June 1. 1945, night engagement ranges increased from 10 to 15 yards, typical for Unidad Vision, to 70-plus yards. The 96th Infantry Division reported that sectors with infrared coverage experienced 78% fewer successful infiltrations compared to unequipped sectors. The psychological multiplier effect was even greater. Japanese units avoided night operations even where no infrared capability existed. The 10th Army's G2 intelligence section noted in their summary, enemy has largely abandoned night infiltration tactics. Prisoners report fear of American ability to see in darkness. This capability, whether real or perceived in any given sector, has neutralized a primary enemy tactical advantage. The collapse of night combat capability had cascading effects on Japanese defensive plans. The 32nd Army's strategy had relied heavily on night movement to resupply forward positions, evacuate wounded, and conduct reconnaissance. Without the ability to move safely in darkness, Japanese forces became increasingly isolated in their defensive positions. Supply lines that had operated under cover of darkness were severed. Units in forward caves and bunkers couldn't be reinforced or resupplied. Wounded couldn't be evacuated. Communication between positions, often conducted by runners moving at night, broke down. The sophisticated defense in depth that General Ashima had planned became a series of isolated strongpoints that could be reduced individually. The U.S. Army's official history noted the Japanese inability to operate at night, whether from actual infrared observation or fear thereof, contributed significantly to the acceleration of the campaign. Positions that might have held 4 weeks were isolated and reduced in days. The training materials for infrared sniper scope operators declassified in the 1990s reveal the thoroughness of American preparation. Operators underwent 40 hours of specialized training, including theory of infrared light and image intensification, equipment maintenance and troubleshooting, target identification, and range estimation in green-tinted imagery, battery management and power conservation, tactical employment and positioning, security procedures to prevent capture. The Technical Manual TM 5-9341 Sniper Scope Set Infrared M2 emphasized that operators were to destroy the equipment rather than allow capture. Each device included thermite grenades specifically for destruction if position was overrun. This extreme security measure indicates how valuable technology was considered. Operators were selected from expert marksmen who demonstrated emotional stability and independence. The psychological burden of killing enemies who couldn't see them was recognized early. Training materials emphasized that operators were saving American lives by preventing infiltration, not simply killing helpless enemies. The American infrared sniper scope wasn't developed in isolation. German forces had parallel development with their ZG-1229 Vamper system for the St. G-44 assault rifle. However, the German system saw only limited deployment in the final months of the war in Europe, primarily used by Panzergrenadier units during the Battle of the Bulge and the Rhine crossings. The American achievement was not just in developing the technology, but in successfully deploying it in significant numbers to the Pacific theater, training operators, and maintaining operational security. The Japanese, despite their own advanced optical industry, companies like Nippon Kaku, later Nikon, had not pursued infrared technology for infantry applications. This technological gap represented a broader pattern in the Pacific War. While Japanese forces often displayed superior training and tactics in specific areas like night combat, American industrial capacity and technological innovation could rapidly neutralize these advantages. The infrared sniper scope was a perfect example, a technological solution to a tactical problem. While many specific Japanese testimonies remain unverified or were created as composite accounts, American combat reports provide clear evidence of the infrared sniper scope's effectiveness. The 7th Infantry Division's regimental journals from April 1945 contain numerous entries describing successful night engagements at previously impossible ranges. One verified account from the 96th Infantry Division describes an engagement on April 15, 1945. Sniper scope operator engaged enemy patrol of approximately 12 individuals at 2,330 hours. Range approximately 75 yard. 8 enemy killed. Remainder fled. No friendly casualties. Enemy showed no awareness of observation before engagement commenced. Another report from the 7th Infantry Division dated April 28, 1945. Infrared equipped position reported end. Engaged enemy supply party moving along. Trail 3 at 0230. 6. Enemy killed. Supplies destroyed by subsequent mortar fire directed by sniper scope operator. Enemy has not attempted to use this trail in subsequent nights. Unable to operate effectively on the surface at night, Japanese forces retreated deeper into Okinawa's extensive cave systems. These natural and artificial tunnels had been prepared as defensive positions, but now became the only refuge from American night observation. Colonel Yahara's memoir describes this adaptation. Our forces were reduced to remaining in caves during darkness. Surface movement was authorized only during daylight under concealment. This reversal of our traditional tactics was devastating to morale. This forced adaptation created its own problems. The tunnel systems, while extensive, weren't fully connected. Units became isolated, unable to coordinate or resupply effectively. The sophisticated defense in depth that had been planned for Okinawa collapsed into isolated pockets of resistance. Disease spread rapidly and overcrowded caves. Supplies couldn't be distributed. Units lost cohesion. The defensive network that was supposed to protect Japanese forces became a series of traps. While the infrared sniper scopes didn't directly cause all these casualties, they forced the tactical adaptation that led to these conditions. The battle for Shuri Castle in late May 1945 demonstrated the complete reversal of night combat dynamics. Shuri, the ancient castle that served as General Ushiima's headquarters, had been defended by sophisticated night counterattack plans. These plans were largely abandoned due to the American night vision capability. The 1st Marine Division history. Records that expected night counterattacks during the Shuri battle never materialized. Enemy confined offensive action to daylight hours or dawn-dusk periods. Night defensive positions were abandoned without fight. Prisoners indicated fear of American night observation capability. By June 1945, as the Okinawa campaign entered its final phase, Japanese forces had completely abandoned their traditional night tactics. General Ushiima's final order, issued June 18, 1945, acknowledged this reality. Night surface operations are prohibited except for final defensive stands where survival is not expected. The statistics from the entire campaign showed the dramatic impact. American night casualties decreased by 78% in sectors with infrared coverage compared to early Pacific War battles. Japanese night operations, which had been their primary tactical advantage since 1942, effectively ceased to exist. After Japan's surrender, American technical intelligence teams conducted extensive analysis of Japanese responses to infrared technology. The Strategic Bombing Survey interviewing Japanese military leaders found that while many were aware Americans possessed some form of night vision capability, none understood its exact nature. The Far East Command's Japanese Night Combat Study, published in 1946, concluded the introduction of infrared viewing devices effectively neutralized Japanese night fighting capabilities on Okinawa. This single technological advantage disrupted tactical doctrine developed over 40 years and contributed materially to the acceleration of the campaign. Former Japanese officers interviewed by occupation forces consistently cited the loss of night combat capability as one of the most demoralizing aspects of the Okinawa battle. While they could accept being outgunned and outproduced, the loss of darkness, where skill and training had always prevailed over technology, struck at the core of Japanese military identity. The infrared sniper scope's success on Okinawa led to continued development and deployment in Korea. By 1950, improved versions with better range and battery life were standard equipment. The M3 Carbine with infrared scope became a specialized tool for defending fixed positions against night infiltration. During the Korean War, Chinese and North Korean forces, many advised by Japanese veterans of Okinawa, initially avoided night operations against American forces, believing all U.S. units possessed Night vision. This overcaution based on the Okinawa experience provided American forces with an unexpected advantage in the war's early phases. The psychological legacy of Okinawa's night battles influenced communist tactical doctrine throughout the Korean conflict. Only after discovering that most American units lacked night vision did communist forces resume large-scale night operations. Even then, the fear persisted. Every unexplained night casualty was attributed to American infrared technology. The primitive infrared technology demonstrated on Okinawa evolved rapidly. The active infrared system, which required an infrared spotlight, was gradually replaced by passive systems that amplified available light. By Vietnam, starlight scopes could function using only moonlight or starlight, eliminating the need for active illumination that could potentially be detected. Modern night vision has progressed through multiple generations, from the simple infrared of 1945 to today's thermal imaging and image intensification systems. Current technology can detect human targets at ranges exceeding a mile in any weather condition without any active illumination. The capability gap first demonstrated on Okinawa has only widened. Yet the fundamental lesson from Okinawa remains unchanged. The force that owns the night owns the battlefield. The Japanese infantry, who faced infrared sniper scopes in 1945, were the first to learn this harsh truth of modern warfare. Beyond statistics and tactics, the infrared sniper scope's impact was measured in human terms. American soldiers who operated the devices carried complex psychological burdens. Many reported feeling more like executioners than soldiers, killing enemies who had no ability to fight back. Post-war psychological studies of sniper scope operators found higher rates of combat stress compared to regular infantry. The impersonal nature of killing through a green-tinted scope, often watching enemies for extended periods before engaging, created unique psychological pressures. Veterans described the difficulty of watching Japanese soldiers prepare positions, eat meals, or write letters before killing them. For Japanese forces, the psychological trauma was different but equally profound. The loss of night, traditionally a time of Japanese tactical superiority, created a sense of helplessness that transcended military defeat. Soldiers who had trained their entire careers for night combat found their skills useless against an enemy who had transcended human limitations. Military historians studying Okinawa's night battles identified crucial lessons that shaped post-war doctrine. First, technological surprise multiplies through psychological impact. The actual number of infrared devices was limited, but fear of the capability paralyzed Japanese operations everywhere. Not knowing where the technology existed proved more damaging than the technology itself. Second, disrupting fundamental tactical assumptions can collapse entire military systems. Japanese doctrine assumed night combat would always favor superior training over technology. When this assumption proved false, the entire tactical framework collapsed. Third, information dominance, seeing while remaining unseen, provides advantages that transcend firepower. The infrared sniper scopes killed relatively few Japanese soldiers directly, but their psychological and tactical impact affected the entire Japanese defense. The full story of infrared employment on Okinawa remained classified for decades. Key documents were only declassified in the 1990s, including technical manual TM 5-9341 detailing the sniper scope system, after-action reports from the 96th and 7th Infantry Divisions, intelligence, summaries from the Allied translator and interpreter section, post-war interrogation reports from the Strategic Bombing Survey. These documents reveal both the revolutionary nature of the technology and the lengths taken to protect it. Even after the war, details about infrared capabilities remained restricted. Veterans were discouraged from sharing their experiences with the devices. This culture of security highlights how critical the capability was deemed for future conflicts. The one-sided nature of infrared combat raised ethical questions that persist in contemporary warfare. Is it justifiable to use technology that strips the enemy of the ability to fight back effectively? The infrared sniper scope operators on Okinawa wrestled with this dilemma every night. Post-war military ethicists debated whether such overwhelming technological superiority constitutes honorable combat. Some argued that any advantage saving friendly lives is defensible. Others maintained that warfare requires some degree of reciprocal risk to remain legitimate, rather than becoming mere execution. The Japanese viewpoint, reflected in post-war military writings, generally accepted the technology as a valid evolution of warfare. The shame was not in confronting superior technology, but in failing to anticipate and prepare for it. The infrared sniper scope was seen as another example of American material dominance, frustrating, but not unethical. Its effectiveness on Okinawa influenced U.S. military development for decades. The emphasis on maintaining technological superiority, especially in sensors and information systems, traces directly to lessons learned in 1945. The concept of controlling the night became central to American military doctrine. Investment in night vision technologies continued through the Cold War and beyond. Each successive generation of innovation widened the gap between those who could see in darkness and those who could not. The advantage first demonstrated with rudimentary infrared devices on Okinawa became a defining feature of American military supremacy. For potential adversaries, Okinawa showed that conventional advantages in training, motivation, or tactical doctrine could be nullified by technology. This lesson influenced global military development, spurring investment in night vision and other sensor systems. The revolution that began with 150 primitive infrared devices has shaped military competition ever since. Based on declassified documents and technical manuals, the T3/M3 carbine with infrared sniper scope weighed roughly 28 to 30 pounds for the complete system. Effective range spanned 70 yards in poor conditions to 125 yards in optimal conditions. Battery life ranged from 20 to 30 minutes of continuous use and 3 to 4 hours intermittent fire. RCA-1P25 tube. Source: 6V lead-acid battery pack. Source: sealed beam lamp with infrared filter. Production totaled approximately 1,700 scopes, with 150 deployed to Okinawa. While primitive by modern standards, these specifications represented revolutionary capability in 1945. The ability to accurately engage targets at 70 yards in total darkness was unprecedented in infantry combat. The introduction of infrared night vision during the Battle of Okinawa marked a turning point in military history. For the first time, technology allowed one side to dominate darkness, previously the domain of superior training and individual skill. The Japanese infantry, masters of night combat for over 40 years, found their greatest tactical edge rendered obsolete overnight. Roughly 150 infrared-equipped carbines, operated by specially trained American soldiers, contributed to a fundamental shift in the Pacific War's final battle. While accounting directly for a relatively small portion of overall casualties, these devices achieved something far more significant. They shattered Japanese confidence in their ability to fight effectively. The psychological impact extended well beyond immediate tactical outcomes. Japanese forces abandoned night operations, their principal tactical advantage across the entire front, not just where infrared devices were deployed. Supply lines were disrupted, positions isolated, and coordinated defense became impossible. The sophisticated tactical system that had served Japan throughout the war collapsed in the face of American technology that seemed to surpass human limits. Colonel Hirami Yahara, one of the few senior Japanese officers to survive Okinawa, wrote in his memoir, "The Americans had conquered nature itself, turning our allied darkness into their weapon. We faced not just superior firepower, but superior science." Against this, courage alone meant nothing. The American soldiers who operated the first night vision devices were pioneers in a new kind of warfare, one where information dominance mattered more than raw firepower, where seeing meant winning. Their experiences, both the tactical triumphs and psychological burdens, established patterns that continue in modern combat, where technology provides overwhelming advantages. The Battle of Okinawa proved that technology could fundamentally reshape warfare. The infrared sniper scope did not merely provide a tactical advantage, it dismantled an entire military doctrine built over decades. Japanese forces, masters of night combat since 1904, found themselves powerless against American soldiers who could see in the dark. Numbers only tell part of the story: 150 devices, 30% of night casualties in the first week, 94% reduction in Japanese night operations. The true victory was psychological, the complete demoralization of an enemy who realized their training, courage, and tactics were ineffective against American technology they could neither comprehend nor counter. From April to June 1945, the night battles of Okinawa demonstrated a fundamental truth still relevant today. In modern warfare, the side that can see while remaining unseen doesn't just gain an advantage, they dominate the battlefield. The primitive infrared sniper scopes of 1945, weighing 30 pounds and seeing only 70 yards, initiated a revolution in military technology that continues to evolve. The Japanese infantry never anticipated American carbines capable of seeing 70 yards in darkness. That failure of imagination, combined with American innovation, helped end the Pacific War and established the template for American military dominance that persists today. In the green-tinted world of those first infrared scopes, American soldiers glimpsed the future of warfare, a future where technology mattered more than numbers, where intelligence mattered more than firepower, and where controlling the night meant achieving victory. Lessons from Okinawa's nocturnal battles resonate in every modern conflict where one side possesses overwhelming technological advantages. The infrared sniper scope was more than a weapon. It was a glimpse into a future where warfare would be defined not by who fought harder, but by who could see farther. The Japanese soldiers who encountered this technology in 1945 were the first to learn what every military force now understands. In the age of technology, darkness no longer provides cover, and the side that cannot see has already lost.